Look at her. Probably here to serve drinks. Eleanor Harrington's cold. Sharp voice sliced through the golden air of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom like shattered glass. Marcus, can you believe this? They're letting people like her into a $500 million investor gala? Marcus Harrington, her smug, entitled son, tilted his champagne flute and smirked as he leaned closer to his mother. Relax. Mother, he said with deliberate arrogance. She probably slipped in through the service entrance. I'll take care of it. Then, raising his voice so half the room could hear, he pointed directly at Aaliyah Thompson and called out mockingly, "Hey, sweetheart, champagne's running low over here. Chop chop." Before we dive deeper into this intense and shocking story, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments, hit subscribe, and like if this story grabs you. Now, let's step into the night that shook the entire New York financial world. The Plaza Hotel's crystal chandeliers glimmered above. Marble floors gleamed under soft golden light, and the grand champagne tower sparkled like liquid diamonds. But for Aaliyah Thompson, this night wasn't about luxury. It was about power. Dressed in a simple, elegant black gown, she blended into the sea of billionaires, Wall Street titans, and global investors gathered to celebrate a $500 million partnership between Thompson Innovations and Harrington Enterprises. No one in this opulent ballroom knew that the woman they were mocking built her billion-dollar tech empire from nothing. No one imagined that she held the power to destroy the Harrington dynasty with a single phone call. But in this moment, as the whispers and laughter rippled around her, Aaliyah stood perfectly still, calm, collected, unreadable. Eleanor Harrington, the 68-year-old matriarch of Harrington Enterprises, approached with an air of entitlement built over generations of privilege. Her silver gown shimmered as her heels clicked sharply against the polished marble, each step deliberate, each breath dripping with authority. Stopping in front of Aaliyah, she tilted her chin, scanning her from head to toe as if inspecting an uninvited guest at her royal court. "This section is for invited guests only," she said coldly, extending her perfectly manicured hand. "Your event pass," without hesitation. Aaliyah handed her pass over, eyes steady, unflinching. Eleanor glanced at it for a single heartbeat, scoffed softly, and then, in one swift motion, tore it clean in half right in front of her. The sound of ripping paper cut through the music like a blade. Gasps escaped from nearby investors, shocked but silent, unwilling to intervene. "Security!" Eleanor snapped, turning her head toward Jamal, a middle-aged black security guard standing near the pillars. "Escort her out immediately." Jamal hesitated, his dark eyes darting from the torn pieces of the pass to Aaliyah, then back to Eleanor. "Ma'am," he said carefully, his voice low but steady. "She's on the guest list." "Do not question me," Eleanor hissed, cutting him off, her words cold enough to freeze the air. "This gala is for investors, not distractions." Marcus stepped forward now, playing to the crowd, his smirk widening as his voice rose deliberately, ensuring every nearby table could hear. "Mother, relax," he said mockingly. "She probably just wants a picture for her little Instagram followers." The Harrington advisors behind him chuckled quietly, their cruel laughter blending with the soft jazz from the live band, feeding Marcus's ego. The humiliation was deliberate, calculated, designed to break her composure, but Aaliyah didn't move, didn't speak, didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly reached into her small black clutch, pulled out her phone, and dialed a single number. The ballroom fell silent. It was as though the air itself had thickened, every eye shifting toward her, sensing that something monumental was about to happen. When the call connected, her voice was calm, precise, and steady, cutting through the hush like thunder. "Rebecca," she said evenly, Cancel the Harrington deal. Effective immediately. Move the entire $500 million to Vanguard Group for one heartbeat. Absolute silence. Then chaos erupted. Gasps swept across the room. Murmurs exploded into frantic whispers, and the once celebratory atmosphere fractured like glass. Investors turned sharply to each other, phones buzzing, notifications pinging in unison as stock trackers lit up. At the far end of the ballroom, Sofia Ramirez, a 28-year-old Mexican-American reporter covering the gala, froze for a second before instinct kicked in. She raised her phone, opened her streaming app, and whispered urgently into her mic, "Ladies and gentlemen, you are not going to believe what's happening at the Plaza Hotel right now." Within 30 seconds, hundreds of viewers were watching live. Within minutes, it would be tens of thousands. Tyler, a young black catering staffer working part-time to pay for college, stepped forward bravely, carefully setting his tray down before speaking loudly enough for the room to hear. "She's on the guest list," he declared, his voice shaking slightly but growing steadier with each word. "I checked it myself. That's Aaliyah Thompson." Marcus turned abruptly, his smugness faltering as confusion flickered across his face. "Aaliyah? Who?" Tyler straightened his shoulders, locking eyes with him. "Aaliyah Thompson, CEO of Thompson Innovations, the woman you just mocked, is the reason this gala exists." Marcus blinked, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Eleanor's jaw tightened, her hand curling into a fist around the shredded pass. Sophia's camera caught every expression, the disbelief, the humiliation, the panic, around them. Conversations erupted as investors pieced together what they'd just witnessed. Phones lit up with breaking news alerts. Thompson Innovations cancels $500 million Harrington deal. Funds redirected to Vanguard Group. Marcus forced a laugh, trying to recover, but his voice cracked. Cute little bluff. He sneered half-heartedly, but his phone vibrated violently in his hand, and when he glanced at the screen, his smirk vanished instantly. A notification glowed. Vanguard confirmed. Funds moved. Press statement pending. Sophia's live stream exploded with comments scrolling faster than she could read. "Who is this woman?" One wrote, "This is power." Another posted, "Within seconds." The hashtag Justice at the Plaza started trending nationwide. Jamal, the security guard who'd been ordered to remove her, swallowed hard, guilt heavy in his tone. "Ms. Thompson," he said softly, almost reverently, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Aaliyah gave him a single nod, her composure unbroken, her presence commanding without needing a word. Finally. Eleanor Harrington found her voice, but the steel was gone, replaced by something brittle, trembling beneath the weight of shifting power. "You'll regret this," she whispered, though her voice cracked on the final word. Aaliyah's dark eyes locked with hers, calm, sharp, unyielding, and her reply was cold as steel. "No, Eleanor," she said quietly but firmly. "You will." In that single moment, everything in the room changed. The laughter stopped. The whispers died. The hierarchy flipped upside down. And by the time the night was over, the Harrington Empire would begin to crumble. All because one woman refused to be humiliated and chose, instead, to fight back in silence. The grand ballroom at the plaza had never felt so tense, the soft jazz fading beneath a rising wave of whispers, gasps, and frantic phone calls as the reality of Aaliyah Thompson's power began to sink in. But the real storm was already brewing far beyond those marble walls. At the far end of the room, Sofia Ramirez's live stream continued without pause, her voice low and urgent as she narrated history in real time. "Viewers, stay tuned. You are witnessing a $500 million deal collapsing live. Thompson Innovations has just pulled out from its partnership with Harrington Enterprises. Within 60 seconds, her stream had crossed 5,000 viewers, Within 5 minutes, it had exploded past 50,000, comments flooding in faster than she could read. "This is insane," one user wrote, finally. Someone standing up to the Harringtons, another posted, and then it happened. The hashtag Justice at the Plaza hit Twitter's top trending slot, crossing 100,000 mentions in less than 10 minutes. Investors watching from London, Dubai, and Hong Kong were suddenly pinging their brokers, demanding explanations, triggering a digital domino effect of panic across the global markets. Inside the ballroom, Marcus Harrington's pale face betrayed his panic even as he tried to force a confident smile, clinging desperately to his champagne flute as though it could anchor him in a collapsing world. "This isn't over," he muttered through clenched teeth to Eleanor. But his voice cracked with every syllable. Eleanor, still standing tall in her shimmering silver gown, tried to regain control of the narrative, raising her voice sharply above the murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, forcing composure, "this is merely a misunderstanding. Harrington Enterprises remains strong, and our partnership discussions with Thomson Innovations are ongoing." But even as she spoke, phones buzzed across the ballroom, displaying breaking news headlines from every major financial network. Thomson Innovations withdraws. Vanguard secures $500 million partnership. Investors, who minutes ago were toasting the Harringtons' empire, now shifted uneasily, whispering, scrolling, calculating losses in real time. Near the staircase, Sophia panned her camera slowly, capturing their faces, the disbelief, the shock, the sudden understanding that the power in this room no longer belonged to the Harrington family. Tyler, still holding his tray near the champagne tower, couldn't hide his grin as he leaned closer to a fellow server and whispered. She flipped the entire room without saying more than 10 words. Jamal, the security guard, remained frozen, guilt written across his face, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. As the chaos swirled around her, Aaliyah stood perfectly still, her calmness only magnifying the weight of her presence, until she lifted her phone once more and pressed speed dial. On the other end, her chief of staff, Rebecca, answered instantly. "Rebecca," Aaliyah said quietly, but the words carried like thunder. "Phase 2 begins now." Rebecca's voice was crisp and prepared, as though she had anticipated this exact moment. "Understood. We've already started auditing Harrington's financials. Preliminary reports show multiple compliance violations. I'll send you the files within the hour." Aaliyah's lips curved slightly, her expression unreadable, before she whispered, "Good. Let them feel the consequences." Across the ballroom, Marcus noticed her speaking and stormed over, his voice sharp and trembling with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed. But Sophia's live stream caught every word, her microphone perfectly positioned to broadcast his desperation to tens of thousands watching. Aaliyah turned to face him, her expression calm, her tone low, controlled, dangerous. "Business," she said simply, and nothing more. The restraint in her voice was more cutting than any shouted retaliation could ever be. Marcus's face flushed crimson as his phone vibrated again and again, each new notification hammering in the reality of what had just happened. "This is sabotage," he spat, but before he could continue, Tyler stepped forward, holding up his catering checklist. "She was on the guest list," Tyler said loudly, his voice echoing across the now silent ballroom. "Everyone saw Eleanor tear up her pass. Everyone heard you mock her. This isn't sabotage. This is consequences." The investors nearby murmured in agreement, and Sophia's viewers flooded her comments with support for Aaliyah. Queen energy. "This is what power looks like. Protect Aaliyah at all costs." Within 15 minutes, hashtag Justice at the Plaza had reached 500,000 mentions, and clips from Sophia's live stream were already being reshared by financial journalists and social activists alike. The narrative was no longer in the Harringtons' control. It belonged to the public now. Eleanor's knuckles whitened as she clutched her champagne glass, her composure cracking beneath the weight of humiliation. She leaned toward Marcus, whispering fiercely, "We need to control this before it destroys us." But Marcus shook his head, panic replacing arrogance. "It's too late," he muttered, showing her his phone. Harrington Enterprises' stock price had just dropped 6% in after-hours trading, across the city, inside Thompson Innovations' Manhattan headquarters. Rebecca was already coordinating with Vanguard Group's CEO, Victor Lang. "Victor," she said, her tone sharp and efficient. "The funds are secure, but Aaliyah wants to accelerate the press release. We go public in 30 minutes. Victor, seated in his glass-walled office overlooking the skyline, smiled grimly. She just pulled the rug out from under them in front of the entire industry. He said, "This isn't just a business win, this is a statement. Back at the plaza." Sophia ended her live stream briefly to call her editor, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "I have the story of the year," she said breathlessly. "You'll have the footage in 5 minutes." She looked up, locking eyes with Aaliyah across the room, silently mouthing the words, "Thank you." Aaliyah nodded once, acknowledging the unspoken alliance between them, a journalist exposing the truth, a CEO rewriting the rules of power. Meanwhile, Eleanor gathered her senior advisors in a quiet corner, her voice low and urgent. "Draft a statement," she ordered. "Blame miscommunication. Spin this back in our favor." But before the words had even left her mouth, a new wave of chaos swept the ballroom. Dozens of investors' phones lit up simultaneously as Vanguard Group announced their press release on every financial platform. Vanguard partners with Thompson Innovations, historic $500 million tech alliance. A hush fell, heavier than before, followed by an audible ripple of gasps. Every single investor understood instantly. The Harringtons had been publicly replaced in real time. Marcus slumped into a chair, his confidence shattered, while Eleanor stood motionless, her carefully curated mask finally cracking as the weight of decades of unchecked power began to crumble. Aaliyah took one last glance around the ballroom, her expression serene, before quietly exiting through the side doors, escorted by Jamal, who now walked a step behind her like a silent protector. Outside, as she stepped into the crisp Manhattan night, her phone buzzed again. Rebecca's message appeared on screen, Phase 2 in motion. "Full audit launching. Violations will be exposed." Aaliyah inhaled deeply, letting the cool air wash over her, then whispered softly to herself, "This is only the beginning." Behind her, chaos reigned inside the plaza, but outside, Aaliyah walked into the darkness with purpose, knowing she hadn't just won a battle. She had started a war that would reshape the financial world forever. The grand ballroom of the plaza had descended into a storm of chaos, whispers and hurried footsteps rippling like waves across the polished marble floor. But amid the noise, Aaliyah Thompson stood at the center, motionless, radiating a calm so powerful it silenced those closest to her, until she finally stepped forward, her heels clicking softly, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Since some of you seem confused," she said evenly, her tone steady but commanding, "allow me to introduce myself properly." She paused, scanning the crowd of investors, advisors, and socialites, letting the weight of the moment settle before she delivered the words that would shift the balance of power forever. "My name is Aaliyah Thompson," she declared, her voice sharp and unshakable. "And I am the CEO of Thompson Innovations, the architect of the $500 million deal you were celebrating tonight." Gasps exploded like sparks leaping from a fire, the murmurs swelling into a collective roar as dozens of investors turned toward their phones, confirming what Sofia Ramirez's live stream had already blasted across social media. Within minutes, Over 300,000 viewers were watching Sophia's feed live, comments flying so fast they blurred on the screen. Wait, she's the CEO? I can't believe they mocked her. This is history in the making. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she zoomed in on Aaliyah, capturing her steady composure, her elegant posture, her quiet strength that needed no theatrics, across the ballroom. Marcus Harrington froze mid-step, his smirk finally gone. His face drained of its arrogant glow as he glanced at Eleanor, whose jaw tightened visibly, her perfect mask cracking beneath the weight of realization. The room seemed to tilt, the power dynamic shifting like gravity itself, pulling investors away from the Harrington orbit and toward the quiet force standing before them. Aaliyah's gaze swept slowly across the ballroom, making deliberate eye contact with faces that, moments ago, laughed at her expense. "You celebrated a deal that no longer exists," she said calmly, her words landing with the impact of a gavel striking a courtroom bench. "And to be clear, Thompson Innovations will never partner with Harrington Enterprises. That decision is final." Her voice was neither angry nor emotional. It was controlled, precise, absolute. And that control was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. In the corner, Tyler, the young catering staffer who had defended her, lowered his tray, watching her with awe. Jamal, the security guard who moments earlier had been ordered to remove her, stood silently now, his shoulders squared, guilt written across his face as though trying to shield her belatedly from the humiliation he had almost contributed to. Near the press gallery, Sophia switched her phone camera to wide angle, capturing the shifting tides in real time, investors huddling in corners, whispering frantically, checking stock prices, recalculating strategies on the fly as Vanguard Group's press release exploded across financial news feeds worldwide. Eleanor Harrington, fighting to salvage what was left of her empire's reputation, stepped forward slowly, her silver gown trailing behind her like a fading crown. "This is outrageous," she snapped, her voice straining to maintain authority, though her tremor betrayed her. "This partnership was built on months of negotiation, and you're throwing it away over nothing?" Aaliyah turned her head toward Eleanor, her expression calm but her gaze piercing, and spoke with quiet finality. "This isn't over nothing, Eleanor. This is over respect, respect you never offered, but that I will always demand." The investors nearby murmured loudly, some nodding in agreement, others pulling out their phones to confirm news of Vanguard's acquisition, their loyalty shifting minute by minute as stock updates painted a grim picture for the Harrington empire. Marcus stepped up beside his mother, desperation clouding his face, his voice rising in a mixture of anger and panic. "You can't just destroy decades of work in one night," he shouted, gesturing wildly toward the cameras that now captured his unraveling live. "Do you have any idea who we are?" Aaliyah tilted her head slightly, her voice soft but edged with steel. "Yes, Marcus," she said evenly. "I know exactly who you are. That's why this decision was so easy." Her words struck harder than any public insult, and Marcus staggered back slightly, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Sophia's livestream audience ballooned past 500,000 viewers. Hashtags multiplying. Hashtag justice at the plaza. Hashtag Thompson takes control. Hashtag respect the CEO. Turning the ballroom scandal into a cultural lightning strike reverberating far beyond New York City, across financial districts in Singapore, London, and Tokyo. Analysts were scrambling to understand what this meant for the future of Harrington Enterprises, as early reports predicted a 14% overnight drop in their valuation. Back in the ballroom, the once celebratory atmosphere had curdled into panic. Some investors slipped discreetly toward the exits, already making calls to Vanguard executives, while others gathered in hushed clusters, whispering plans to distance themselves from the Harrington name before the damage became irreparable. Eleanor, still clinging to the remnants of control, hissed under her breath to her advisors. Issue a statement. Immediately. We'll spin this. Say she breached confidentiality. Say anything. But even as she spoke, Sophia's live stream captured her words perfectly. And within seconds, the clip was being reshared with mocking captions, Harrington scrambling as power slips away. Aaliyah turned slowly, addressing the entire room now, her voice carrying effortlessly despite its low, measured tone. For years. Companies like yours have dismissed people like me, she said, her dark eyes locking onto a row of Wall Street executives. But tonight isn't about race or gender. It's about dignity. It's about accountability. And from this moment forward, Thompson Innovations will only build partnerships that reflect those values. The ballroom was silent now, every syllable amplified by the tension, each word sinking into the marble floor and echoing back in the uneasy breaths of the powerful. Sophia's camera zoomed in on Eleanor's clenched fists, Marcus's glassy stare, the beads of sweat forming along the hairlines of advisors suddenly questioning their careers. Behind Aaliyah. Tyler's voice rose unexpectedly, his tone passionate, his words trembling but powerful. That's right. I saw everything. I saw them tear up your pass. I heard them mock you like you didn't belong here, but you do. A ripple of applause began at the edge of the room, faint at first, then spreading like wildfire as others joined in. Investors, servers, journalists, even Jamal, the security guard, clapping softly at his post. It wasn't loud or triumphant, but it was symbolic, a quiet acknowledgement that the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Eleanor turned on her heels, retreating toward the exit with Marcus trailing behind, her advisors whispering frantically at her side. Sophia whispered into her mic, her voice reverent and steady despite her racing heartbeat. History is being made tonight. A CEO mocked, dismissed, and humiliated, now reshaping the future of one of the most powerful families on Wall Street. Her live stream crossed 700,000 live viewers, clips ricocheting across TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter, setting the internet ablaze, as the Harringtons disappeared into the hallway. Aaliyah lifted her phone again, Rebecca's name glowing on the screen before she even hit call. Rebecca, she said softly, accelerate the compliance audit. Every violation, every detail. I want it public by tomorrow morning. Rebecca's calm reply came instantly, already in motion. Aaliyah, by sunrise. The Harrington name will never carry the same weight again. Aaliyah ended the call, slipped her phone into her clutch, and exhaled slowly, steadying herself as she gazed across the transformed ballroom, where whispers of doubt had become murmurs of respect. Tonight, she had turned humiliation into dominance, silence into power, and in doing so, she had rewritten the rules entirely. The tides had shifted, and the Harrington dynasty would never recover from the storm she had unleashed. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom had shifted from elegance to chaos in less than an hour. The once celebratory atmosphere replaced by panic, whispered arguments, and frantic phone calls. But what was happening outside those marble walls was even more explosive, as Sofia Ramirez's live stream had crossed 1.2 million live viewers, with clips being reshared on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube faster than anyone could track. The hashtag #JusticeAtThePlaza dominated the global trending charts, joined by hashtag ThompsonTakesControl and hashtag HarringtonFallout. As financial news outlets scrambled to push breaking updates in real time, CNBC ran a red banner across the screen. Thompson Innovations terminates $500 million deal. Vanguard secures partnership. Bloomberg reported, Harrington Enterprises faces investor revolt after Plaza scandal. In London, Hong Kong, and Dubai. Trading desks buzzed with tension as analysts warned clients to exit Harrington stocks immediately. triggering a 9% after-hours plunge within 30 minutes and setting off a chain reaction of sell-offs among hedge funds, private equity partners, and institutional investors tied to the Harrington name, inside the ballroom. Eleanor Harrington stood frozen near the staircase, her silver gown shimmering under the golden chandeliers, but her composure shattered. The phone in her hand vibrating non-stop as messages from panicked board members and investors flooded in. Marcus Harrington paced back and forth like a caged animal. His tie loosened, his champagne-stained cuff wrinkled, muttering half-finished sentences under his breath as he struggled to comprehend how decades of dominance could unravel in a single night. Their advisors huddled in a corner, whispering frantically, drafting a desperate statement to blame miscommunication and technical misunderstandings. But every narrative they tried to build collapsed instantly as Sophia's live stream footage continued circulating online, capturing Eleanor tearing up Aaliyah's event pass, Marcus mocking her openly, and Jamal being ordered to remove her. In the court of public opinion, there was no defense, no spin, no recovery. Across the ballroom, Aaliyah Thompson stood near the towering champagne fountain, untouched by the chaos around her, her calm presence commanding more power than any shouted declaration could. Her phone buzzed, and she stepped aside to answer. "Rebecca," she said softly, her voice measured and steady despite the storm unfolding around her. On the other end, her chief of staff responded instantly. "Phase 2 is underway. Vanguard has confirmed the transfer, and Victor Lang is ready to go public in 20 minutes. Also, we've secured the compliance reports, multiple violations, conflicts of interest, and unreported liabilities in Harrington's offshore accounts. We can bury them." Aaliyah's gaze swept across the room, locking briefly on Eleanor, whose mask of authority had finally cracked. "Good," Aaliyah said, her tone sharp but quiet. "Start compiling the data. Tonight is about reputation. Tomorrow, we dismantle the foundation." She ended the call just as Victor Lang's announcement hit every major financial outlet. Vanguard Group partners with Thompson Innovations in historic 500 Millers alliance. The headline was everywhere. CNBC, Bloomberg, Reuters, and the New York Times homepage. And each notification triggered another ripple of panic through the investor crowd still lingering at the gala. Phones buzzed, screens lit up, assistants whispered frantically into earpieces, and one by one, people began quietly slipping out of the ballroom, dialing other firms and realigning their loyalties in real time. Sophia's live stream spiked again, breaking 1.8 million concurrent viewers, her soft, urgent voice narrating each twist and turn. "Viewers, you're watching history unfold. In less than an hour, the Harrington Empire has lost control of a $500 million deal. Investors are fleeing, and Thompson Innovations has taken the lead in a partnership that will reshape the tech industry." Comments poured in from around the world. "This is bigger than business. This is justice. I'm watching from London and Vanguard's servers just crashed." Finally, someone stood up to old money arrogance. Tyler, the young catering staffer who had defended Aaliyah earlier, leaned against the wall near the service entrance, phone in hand, shaking his head in disbelief. She didn't even raise her voice. He whispered to another server. She destroyed them without yelling, without screaming, just pure power. Jamal, still at his post near the double doors, heard him and nodded slowly, his voice low and heavy with guilt. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than noise," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on Aaliyah with a new kind of respect. Meanwhile, Eleanor snapped out of her stunned paralysis, grabbing Marcus by the arm and pulling him into a corner with two of their senior advisors. "Listen to me," she hissed, her tone sharp and urgent. "We control the narrative now or we lose everything. Call Edward in PR, draft a statement blaming Thompson for breach of trust. Accuse her of acting unethically." One advisor hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Harrington, with respect, the footage is everywhere. The live stream has over 1 million viewers. If we push this angle, it'll backfire. Eleanor's glare hardened, but the advisor was right. They were trapped, checkmated by their own arrogance and Aaliyah's unshakable composure. Across town, inside Thompson Innovations' glass-walled headquarters, Victor Lang raised a toast with his board as they watched the fallout unfold in real time. "She played this flawlessly," he said, smiling slightly, his reflection glowing against the skyline. "By morning, the market will know exactly who leads this industry, and it's not Harrington Enterprises, back at the plaza." Sophia returned to live streaming, zooming in on Eleanor and Marcus as they argued heatedly with their advisors, her voice steady and deliberate. "Viewers. The Harringtons are scrambling to contain the damage. But it's too late," she said softly into her mic. "Their stock is collapsing, investors are abandoning them, and the narrative has shifted permanently, within minutes." Analysts on live news broadcasts began speculating on a possible shareholder revolt, predicting that Eleanor could face a forced resignation from her own board within weeks. The audience erupted in Sophia's chat room, comments flying faster than she could read. "Eleanor Harrington is done. Marcus better start looking for a new job. Thompson Innovations just became untouchable." Meanwhile, Aaliyah stood by the balcony overlooking the ballroom, watching the shifting currents with calm detachment, her hands resting lightly on the railing as though she were observing from above the storm rather than standing at its center. She received another call, this time from her legal counsel, Daniel Ortiz. "Aaliyah," he said quickly, his tone crisp. "We've reviewed the contracts. Harrington's financial exposure is significant. If they try to retaliate, we can countersue for breach of fiduciary duty. They don't have the leverage they think they do." Aaliyah nodded slightly, even though he couldn't see her. "Prepare the filings," she said softly. "If they make one wrong move, we finish what they started." As she ended the call, her phone buzzed again, a message from Rebecca lighting up the screen. "Phase 2 complete. Compliance report ready. Sending files now." Aaliyah opened the attachment and scanned the first page, her expression unreadable. But deep down, she knew this was bigger than one deal, one scandal, or one family's downfall. This was about rewriting the rules of who held power in boardrooms that had dismissed people like her for decades. Behind her, the sound of Sophia's voice rose again as she read breaking headlines live. "Harrington Enterprises loses 2.3 billion in market cap in one night," the crowd murmured. Investors clutched their phones. And even those who had once worshipped the Harrington name understood a new reality. The dynasty had fallen, and Aaliyah Thompson had taken their place at the top. Eleanor stood near the exit now, her advisors huddled close, her silver gown catching the last light from the chandeliers as though mocking her faded authority. Marcus, his arrogance stripped bare, stared blankly at his phone, scrolling through plummeting stock prices as sweat beaded along his hairline. For the first time in decades, the Harringtons weren't the ones deciding the terms. They were the ones reacting, scrambling, falling behind, and at the center of it all. Aaliyah remained silent, her composure unbroken, her presence magnetic, her power undeniable, in that moment. Everyone in the ballroom understood the truth. The Plaza scandal was no longer just a story. It was a turning point. A new era had begun. And by the time the sun rose over Manhattan, the Harrington Empire would never be the same again. The Manhattan skyline shimmered like molten gold under the midnight lights as Aaliyah Thompson stood in the glass-walled executive boardroom of Thompson Innovations, high above the city that never slept, her reflection merging with the skyline while she watched the storm she had unleashed take shape below. Behind her, Rebecca scrolled rapidly through her tablet, displaying graphs, press releases, and investor memos, while Victor Lang, CEO of Vanguard Group and now her closest ally, leaned casually against the polished walnut conference table, sipping black coffee as though the collapse of one of Wall Street's oldest dynasties were nothing more than another Tuesday night. The Plaza scandal had detonated less than 3 hours ago, but the shockwaves were accelerating faster than anyone predicted. Harrington Enterprises had already lost $3.2 billion in market capitalization. 2 major hedge funds had filed to freeze their positions, and 6 key vendors had emailed notices suspending all future contracts pending reputational reassessment. Yet Aaliyah's expression remained composed, her posture relaxed, her voice steady as she spoke. "Phase 3 begins now," she said quietly, but her words carried like steel through the room. Victor straightened, his sharp suit catching the glow of the city lights, his dark eyes fixed on her. "I've pulled every vendor contract linked to Harrington," he said, sliding a folder across the table toward her. "We hit them where it hurts. Distribution, logistics, raw materials. Half their vendors already prefer working with us. We make them an offer tonight. By sunrise, their supply chain collapses." Aaliyah opened the folder, scanning the list carefully, noting names she had memorized over years of observing Harrington's dominance. "Strategic acquisitions only," she said firmly. "I want leverage, not chaos." Rebecca looked up from her tablet, her voice calm but threaded with quiet urgency. "I've also finished the compliance report. There are 12 major violations, unreported offshore accounts, falsified board disclosures, and 2 pending class action suits buried in Delaware filings. If we release this publicly, the SEC opens an investigation before the end of the week." Aaliyah glanced briefly at Rebecca, her gaze thoughtful, calculating. "Not yet," she said softly. "We hold the report for maximum impact. Timing is leverage, and leverage is everything." Victor smiled faintly, shaking his head in quiet admiration. "You dismantled their reputation tonight. Tomorrow, you take their foundation." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "And by next week, Eleanor Harrington will be begging us to buy what's left of her empire." Across the room, a notification popped up on the giant wall display. Sofia Ramirez's name trending across every major platform. Her live stream highlights from the Plaza had hit 10 million cumulative views, reshared by CNBC, Business Insider, and thousands of independent creators dissecting every humiliating second in real time. Sofia herself was still awake, working from her Brooklyn apartment, her notes scattered across the floor, phone glued to her ear as she coordinated with her editor at the Times. Her exclusive exposé, titled "The Fall of the Harrington Dynasty," would go live at 6 a.m., timed to dominate the morning news cycle and amplify Aaliyah's next move. Back in the boardroom, Rebecca projected a map of Harrington Enterprises' current influence, a sprawling network of subsidiaries, strategic partners, lobbyists, and advisory firms stretching across 8 countries. Aaliyah folded her arms, studying it carefully, her gaze sharp, her voice low. "We don't just take their vendors," she said slowly. "We take their allies, every partner they've built their power on, every whisper network they've relied on, every boardroom they think they control. I want them isolated before they realize it's happening." Victor leaned closer, tapping the digital map as clusters of contracts and partnerships lit up in red. "We've already reached out to their second-tier investors," he said. "Half of them are on the fence. We give them security, stability, and an open invitation to Vanguard. By the end of the quarter, Harrington's capital pipeline runs dry," Rebecca added quietly. "I've also confirmed 2 internal whistleblowers willing to cooperate. One of them has access to private emails showing discriminatory hiring practices tied directly to Eleanor's signature." Aaliyah paused, her expression still and unreadable, but the slightest flicker of emotion passed behind her dark eyes. "Secure them," she said firmly. Get them protected and make sure they understand we don't negotiate. We deliver. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glowed with restless energy. The city unaware that a quiet war was being waged hundreds of feet above its streets. Phones buzzed continuously across the room as notifications poured in from international markets reacting overnight. Tokyo futures dropped 4%. London hedge funds redirected liquidity toward Vanguard. And Dubai's sovereign wealth managers requested emergency calls with Alia's strategy team. Victor broke the silence with a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Eleanor underestimated you," he said, swirling the last sip of his coffee. She thought she was dealing with someone who wanted her approval. She never realized she was standing across from her replacement. Alia's lips curved faintly, though her tone remained cool and restrained. "I'm not here to replace her, Victor. I'm here to build something bigger, something she could never imagine, because she's still trapped in an empire built on privilege, not performance." Rebecca's tablet pinged again as an incoming message appeared from Sophia. "The exposé is complete. Draft ready for review." Alia read the first headline across the wall screen. Exclusive. Inside Harrington's discriminatory culture and financial misconduct. The scandal behind the plaza. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaling slowly, then nodded. "Good," she said softly. "Let the world see them exactly as they are." Victor set his cup down and straightened his jacket, his voice crisp and decisive. "Then we execute tonight. By morning, we control half their vendors, a third of their partners, and every narrative on every screen." Alia walked slowly toward the window, her heels soft against the polished oak floor, gazing out over the city with a calm that felt heavier than silence itself. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Daniel Ortiz. Her lead counsel, "Alia," he said quickly. "We've drafted pre-litigation notices for breach of fiduciary duty and financial misconduct. If Harrington tries anything, we'll launch civil proceedings within 48 hours, she replied evenly. "Hold them until Eleanor makes her move. When she swings, we strike." As she ended the call, Rebecca stepped forward hesitantly, her voice quieter than before. "Alia," she said softly, "you know this isn't just a takeover anymore. By the time this is over, Harrington Enterprises won't survive." Alia turned slowly, her expression composed but her words deliberate, unwavering. "Rebecca," she said calmly, "they chose this the moment they tore up my pass. This isn't revenge, this is justice." The boardroom fell silent, the hum of servers and distant sirens the only sounds breaking the tension, until Victor finally spoke, his voice low but resolute. "By sunrise, the balance of power shifts," he said. Alia nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the city lights below, knowing that by the time the world woke up, the Harrington Empire would already be crumbling, not with a single blow, but with 1,000 quiet cuts delivered precisely, strategically, and without mercy. The morning sun crept across the Manhattan skyline, but for Eleanor Harrington, it brought no light, no warmth, and no peace. Harrington Enterprises had lost $4, $7 billion in market value overnight. 22 major partners had announced contract suspensions, and Sofia Ramirez's exposé, Inside Harrington's Culture of Discrimination and Financial Misconduct, had gone live at exactly 6 a.m., racking up 3 million views in its first hour, on every financial news network. Alia Thompson's calm, poised face played beside Eleanor's viral humiliation from the plaza, and the contrast was devastating. Now, just past 7:30. The elevator doors to Thompson Innovations' glass-walled headquarters slid open with a soft chime, and Eleanor stepped out, flanked by Marcus and 2 advisors, her silver hair pinned perfectly, her flawless pearls in place, her mask of control polished but cracking beneath the weight of desperation, inside the towering executive boardroom. Aaliyah stood with Victor Lang and Rebecca, the soft Manhattan light illuminating her face as she reviewed a briefing on Harrington's spiraling collapse. When the doors opened, Rebecca looked up sharply, but Aaliyah didn't move, didn't speak, her calm composure cutting deeper than anger ever could. Eleanor strode forward, her heels striking the polished oak floor with authority she no longer possessed. Marcus trailing behind her, his jaw tight, his posture rigid. "Aaliyah," Eleanor began, her tone smooth but strained. "We need to discuss a resolution. Last night, mistakes were made, words were said. We'd like to move forward." Aaliyah slowly raised her gaze from the folder in her hands, her dark eyes steady, her expression unreadable, her voice quiet but cutting through the room like glass. "You want to move forward?" she said softly, each word deliberate. "After you mocked me, tore up my pass, ordered security to remove me from a gala celebrating my deal?" Marcus stepped in quickly, his voice low and urgent. "We're here to apologize," he said, forcing the words out as though they burned. "We realize now who you are, and we want to fix this." Victor Lang, leaning casually against the edge of the table, gave a short laugh, shaking his head. "Who she is?" he repeated sharply. "Marcus, you knew exactly who she was when you mocked her. Don't insult this room by pretending otherwise." Eleanor stiffened, her voice snapping back like a whip. "We came here in good faith," she said coldly. "This isn't about what happened at the plaza anymore. This is about the future of Harrington Enterprises and Thompson Innovations. The entire industry is watching. Do you really want to destroy us publicly?" Aaliyah's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, not of amusement, but of certainty, of control. She stepped forward, heels whispering softly against the polished floor, until she stood just a few feet from Eleanor. "Eleanor," she said quietly, her voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "You destroyed yourself publicly. All I did was let the world see who you are." For a moment, silence stretched across the boardroom, broken only by the faint buzz of Rebecca's tablet as a new notification came in. Rebecca glanced at the screen and nodded slightly toward Aaliyah. "It's live," she said softly. Aaliyah turned toward the wall display as Sofia Ramirez's exposé illuminated the massive screen. Headline bold against the white backdrop: "The Plaza Scandal, Harrington Enterprises accused of systemic discrimination and financial misconduct." Below it, leaked documents from the compliance audit detailed 12 major violations, unreported offshore accounts, and falsified shareholder disclosures, each tied directly to Eleanor's signature. Eleanor's face drained of color as she stared at the screen, Marcus's breathing quickening beside her. Victor folded his arms, his expression razor-sharp. "You thought this was about one deal," he said flatly. "It's bigger than that. This is about trust, and you've lost it." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice rising, desperation cracking through the polished facade. "We built this industry," she hissed. "For 40 years. The Harrington name has opened doors you couldn't even find." Aaliyah's voice cut her off like a blade. "And for 40 years, she said, her tone low, steady, lethal. "You used those doors to keep people like me out." She let the silence after her words hang heavy, suffocating, final, across the table. Rebecca pulled up live investor sentiment data on the wall screen. Harrington Enterprises' confidence rating had plummeted to 18%, while Thompson Innovations surged to 94%, the highest rating in its history. "Investors are watching this room," Rebecca said evenly, her voice sharp with precision. "This isn't just about last night. This is about leadership, and right now, you've lost it." Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she reached into her bag and slid a letter across the table. "Our board has authorized a revised offer," she said tightly. Full reinstatement of the partnership. We'll commit additional capital. A public apology. We can end this tonight. Aaliyah stared at the envelope for a long, silent moment before sliding it back across the polished walnut surface with a single finger. Her voice quiet but firm. Thompson Innovations doesn't partner with companies built on discrimination, she said coldly. There will be no reinstatement. No apology can change that. Marcus slammed his fist lightly against the table, his composure unraveling. Do you have any idea what you're doing? He spat, his voice sharp, shaking with suppressed rage. You're destroying a dynasty that's been here longer than you've been alive. Aaliyah's gaze locked onto his, unflinching, calm, and absolute. Marcus, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper but heavy with finality. I'm not destroying your dynasty. You are. Sophia's expose notification count ticked higher on Rebecca's tablet. 6 million views and climbing, with major networks breaking into live coverage to discuss the implosion of Harrington Enterprises. CNBC analysts predicted Eleanor would face a shareholder revolt within the week. Bloomberg speculated on a forced restructuring. Outside the glass walls, reporters were already gathering on Madison Avenue, cameras flashing, waiting for statements that would never come. Eleanor stood rigid, pearls trembling slightly against her collarbone, her entire body taut as she forced herself to breathe evenly. You're making a mistake, she whispered hoarsely. But there was no conviction behind her words anymore. Victor Lang finally stepped forward, his voice crisp and unyielding. The only mistake, he said coolly, was thinking this industry still belonged to you. Eleanor closed her eyes for a brief moment, the weight of years pressing down on her shoulders, before turning sharply on her heel, signaling Marcus and her advisors to follow. They exited without another word, their silence louder than any plea could have been. As the doors slid shut behind them, Rebecca exhaled slowly, looking toward Aaliyah. What now? She asked softly. Aaliyah turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silhouette framed against the awakening Manhattan skyline, her voice calm, quiet, resolute. Now, she said, we build and we lead. Behind her, Sophia's expose played silently on the wall screen, headlines flashing, tweets surging, markets shifting, and a new reality setting in across every corner of Wall Street. The Harrington dynasty had fallen, and Aaliyah Thompson had just taken their place at the helm of an industry they once controlled. 6 months had passed since the night at the plaza, but its echoes still reverberated through every corner of Wall Street, boardrooms, and global markets, reshaping the balance of power in ways few could have imagined. The Plaza scandal had become a landmark case studied in business schools and diversity summits worldwide, with Sofia Ramirez's viral expose surpassing 96 million views and spawning documentaries, op-eds, and policy debates about discrimination and accountability in corporate America. In the center of this new era stood Aaliyah Thompson, no longer just the CEO of Thompson Innovations, but the most influential figure in the tech finance nexus, her name synonymous with power, integrity, and transformation. From her corner office on the 72nd floor of Thompson Innovations' Manhattan headquarters, framed by floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the city, Aaliyah gazed out at a skyline she had quietly reshaped. The air was different now. Conversations in boardrooms were different now. Expectations of leadership had shifted forever. Since severing all ties with Harrington Enterprises, Thompson Innovations had not only solidified its partnership with Vanguard Group, but also launched the Elevate Fund, a $2.5 billion initiative designed to invest in minority-led startups, women-owned businesses, and innovative ventures from overlooked communities. In just 6 months, Elevate had funded 82 companies across 14 states, creating nearly 9,000 jobs and drawing global acclaim as one of the boldest economic empowerment initiatives in recent history. News anchors called it a generational shift, while Forbes featured Aaliyah on its cover with the headline, "The CEO Who Redefined Power," across the city. A different scene unfolded inside what remained of Harrington Enterprises, once a towering symbol of old money dominance. The company now operated out of a downsized office near Park Avenue after selling 3 properties and liquidating 2 subsidiaries to cover mounting legal fees. The board had voted Eleanor Harrington out just 7 weeks after the Plaza scandal. Citing irreparable reputational damage and fiduciary failure, she retreated from public life entirely, her name quietly removed from the company's official communications. Her fall from grace as swift as it was complete. Marcus Harrington fared no better. After a failed attempt to launch his own consulting firm, he was last spotted in Dubai, attempting to rebuild his reputation but largely shunned by the industry. Investors who once vied for Harrington invitations now avoided them entirely, redirecting hundreds of millions toward Vanguard and Thompson Innovations, solidifying their dominance in the tech finance sector. Sophia Ramirez, now celebrated as the journalist who cracked open one of the most consequential corporate scandals of the decade, had released her groundbreaking documentary on Netflix titled Justice at the Plaza. Within its first 48 hours, the documentary topped the global streaming charts in 27 countries, drawing 22 million views, winning Sophia a Peabody Award, and earning her a seat among the most influential voices in modern investigative journalism. Her closing monologue in the film became an anthem for a generation seeking accountability. Power is not inherited, it's earned. And when power dismisses dignity, dignity will always fight back. Tyler, the young catering staffer who had defended Aaliyah that night, had been offered a full scholarship to Columbia Business School through Thompson's new Leadership Through Inclusion program. He often spoke in interviews about the moment that changed his life. "I thought I was just speaking up for someone who deserved respect. I didn't realize I was speaking into history." Jamal, the security guard who hesitated that night, now served as head of corporate security for Thompson Innovations, personally recruited by Aaliyah after he resigned from Harrington Enterprises. Quietly, without press releases or ceremony, she ensured his kids' college funds were secured, a gesture Jamal described as proof that true leadership remembers humanity. But beyond individual stories, the entire industry had transformed in the wake of the Plaza scandal. The SEC launched sweeping audits into companies accused of discriminatory practices, resulting in 38 corporate settlements totaling $1.2 billion and the creation of stricter reporting regulations. Harvard Business Review published a feature titled The Thompson Effect, analyzing how Aaliyah's handling of the scandal set a new gold standard for crisis leadership. Her refusal to settle quietly, her decision to act decisively in public, and her choice to reinvest victory into systemic change had shifted expectations globally. Aaliyah's phone buzzed softly on her desk, pulling her from the window as Rebecca entered the room with a quiet smile. The Elevate Fund just closed its 4th round. Rebecca reported, "Another $640 million secured. Victor says the partnership expansion announcement is ready." Aaliyah nodded slowly, closing the briefing in front of her. "Good," she said softly, her voice steady but reflective. "This is what we build on. This is why we fought." Victor Lang walked in moments later, his sharp suit immaculate, his presence grounded and confident. "We just got word from the White House," he said lightly, sliding a folder onto the desk. "The administration wants you to keynote the National Innovation Summit next month. Themes equity and access. They want you to headline the opening session." Aaliyah inhaled deeply, letting the weight of the moment settle before nodding once. "We'll do it," she said simply, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. Across the city, Harrington Enterprises, now under interim CEO Martin Cole, struggled to salvage what little influence remained. Their valuation had dropped 78% since the scandal, and 3 former board members faced SEC charges related to falsified financial disclosures exposed during Aaliyah's compliance audit. The once invincible empire had become a cautionary tale taught in business ethics courses nationwide. How arrogance, entitlement, and exclusion could bring down even the most powerful dynasties. Meanwhile, Sophia's latest editorial in the New York Times, titled The Quiet Revolution, chronicled how Aaliyah's leadership had inspired a generation of women and minority entrepreneurs to challenge outdated power structures. Social media buzzed with clips of her keynote speeches, mentorship programs, and community initiatives, with hashtags like #BuiltByAaliyah and #LeadershipWithDignity trending regularly. As dusk settled over Manhattan, Aaliyah stood on the private balcony outside her office, the city's pulse thrumming beneath her feet, the lights stretching endlessly into the horizon. Rebecca joined her quietly, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "6 months," Rebecca said softly, her tone half disbelief, half awe. "6 months ago, they tore up your past like you didn't belong. Now," she trailed off, gesturing toward the skyline, toward the towering Thompson Innovations logo glowing across the East River, toward the invisible ripple effect reshaping industries and futures. Aaliyah smiled faintly, her gaze steady, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of legacy. "I didn't fight to belong, Rebecca," she said calmly. "I fought so no one else would ever have to prove they did." Down below, the city roared with life, oblivious to the quiet revolution unfolding hundreds of feet above. Inside, Sophia's documentary replayed on a wall-mounted screen, its final scene showing Aaliyah walking calmly out of the plaza that night as chaos erupted behind her, her voiceover narrating words that now defined an era. "Dignity isn't given, it's claimed. And when the world refuses to give it to you, you build your own." Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your city below.